Electrocast.
There's a change happening in the way we live, the way we work, the way we spend our money and make our decisions. We are evolving to be more conscious in our actions in a way that serves the world and makes it a better place. Welcome to the Ethical Evolution. The Ethical Evolution podcast is brought to you by Ethical Change Agency. I'm Bindi, I'm the founder, and my mission is to help ethical entrepreneurs and holistic healers to find their voice through spiritual coaching and podcasting. I'm honoured to bring you the stories of those who create change through healing, kindness, innovation, purpose, and spirit. Understanding that to create collective change, we need to be the change. It all begins with us. Hey, before we get into this episode, I just wanted to let you know that you can now grab my album of guided meditations. It's called Sourced by Spirit, and it's on all streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, YouTube Music, and many more. There's 11 guided meditations ranging from 4 minutes through to 10 minutes to help you reset your mind and your body at any time. Okay, now let's get on with the show. Kyleigh Weathers is the creator of Queerly Attached, a business that is dedicated to providing attachment trauma recovery resources for the LGBTQ+ community. Attachment trauma hits different when you're queer. We each have our own experience around societal rejection, parental abandonment, and religious trauma. Kylie was raised Mormon, caught at 16 with a girlfriend, attempted to pray the gay away, served a mission for her church in 2005, and was sent home from mission because she was a lesbian. Finally peeked out of the closet in 2006, Uhaul and a wife in 2008. So how the hell did she end up married to a man with a son by 2012? Join us as we explore queer identity and attachment and how true healing can occur. Welcome, Kylie, to the Ethical Evolution.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, super excited to chat with you today. For those people who don't know who you are and what you do, can you go ahead and tell us?
Well, my name's Kyleigh Weathers, and gosh, I think I'll start with who I am first. We'll do the quick shot here. So my name's Kylie. I was born and raised in Leavenworth, Kansas. I was an Army brat. My dad was a retired Army colonel, and I was raised Mormon. I was also very gay, and that was a difficult journey and led to quite a dramatic life. Now here I am at 40, and it's attachment style and theory has just taken over my world, and I've just seen this direct impact, and I'm able to look back on this story now, and it makes sense in a way that I've been able to move forward differently. So I'm a single lesbian mother of a 10-year-old son with a fantastic relationship with his dad, and I have just started Queerly Attached. And Queerly Attached, I'm calling myself a queer attachment coach. Yeah, I'm a life coach, but if we're going to chat, we're going to be talking about attachment because I just have seen how it just unfolds in every connection, and there's just no denying it. So that's what I'm about. So when I read your story and your bio, I was like, wait, what? Can you just step us through your story and how you got to here? Absolutely. I'll do the quick shot because I think that you and I are going to have plenty to talk about. The story ends up taking a lot of these interviews, so let's do if I can run it quickly. Like I mentioned, I was raised Mormon, so that really was just a majority of my life. It's a pretty high-demand religion. And I, at 16, had my first experience with a girl, and it was new, all of it. And a little confusing, but also felt just really right. And she was my best friend at the time. I actually haven't shared this. My mom wrote me a letter at the end of that year. And in that letter, 1999, she chronicles kind of what had happened for me that year. And towards the end, she mentioned, and your best friend is so-and-so who we love and adore. So that's December of 99. In February of 2000, they find a note in my trash that busts the whole thing up. And it just flipped my whole world. And it was immediate, like, to the bishop to confess, probably need to be removed from the school, definitely have to get out of band because we both played saxophone. Like, met in band camp, so gay.
Oh my God.
It just flipped everything. And it felt just really chaotic. And it took over a large portion of just what now my life kind of became. I became struggling with same-sex attraction, and I had to see therapists who dealt with that and talk a lot to bishops and leaders of the church about it. And it influenced just so much of my church activity. And it was this constant repression until I actually ended up serving a mission myself in Argentina, where I fell in love with my companion. When you are 24/7 with someone else of the same gender, and imagine a lesbian on a mission having a hard time. So there that went, and I didn't end up completing my mission. I went home early, and it was another just world flipped, because to come home early was just so dishonorable. And advised not to talk about it, what had happened, not to share it with my family. And I tried to hang on, but it wasn't very long before I was just like, damn it, it just keeps happening. Oh no, these women. And so I just had that kind of like, I would end up with someone and then go back to church because God, right? And it was just this bouncing back and forth. And a lot of the women I dated were Mormon. There's a lot of us just confused about what the hell and how do you stay in this religion and also have these feelings. So many of my friends now are these ex-Mormon lesbian women who have divorced their husbands, right? So many of us have that same path. The only, I think, a major difference in mine is that I left the church and came back. And that's what makes the bio just crazy, is because I actually was married to a woman. And we got to about 3 years when she decided to go back to the church. And again, another world flip, another new book opening. Just never feels like another chapter in the same book. And I followed suit about a month later. I was alone. I didn't have any family that was supportive of what I was about in my life. And I was in a very small rural Georgia town. And going back to the church meant, well, one, I got to stay friends with her, at least for a time. And I was able to keep some friendships, and I was able to get my family back immediately. And so it was the support I needed. And it wasn't long before I was immediately back into full fellowship. They'd restored all my rights or whatever. And I met my son's dad pretty quickly after that. And, that's the part where I think people get a little like, huh?
Yeah.
But always knew. He always knew. I talked about it with him from the beginning. At this point in my life, I'm feeling like this queer woman who needs to get it under control so that I can do the thing I'm supposed to do, right? And so I meet this guy who's lovely, and I absolutely believe that sexuality is fluid. At the time, I wasn't calling myself a lesbian, or if I was, I wasn't doing it without crying. And so I had found this lovely person who was just very accepting of what I had come from. He had also come from his own path of being outside of the church. And so it just kind of made sense at the time, and we fell in step, and we had a beautiful go of it. And we had our son just a year into the marriage. And when our son was 6 months old, I had a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed, and that changed our marriage. Another big flip in the journey. And so waking up from a nap, screaming in pain, paralyzed, was never in the path of the cards, especially not with a 6-month-old. And I believe now that the body keeps score, and I know that injury was a result of just finally all parts of me, mind, body, and spirit, saying, we have to stop, please. We're dying here. And I was starving for emotional connection. We never really connected on that level, and it was never like at a fault of, I think, either of ours, but I've always been into communication and conflict. That's always been part of me. I've always worked in mental health. So we always had connection through conflict. That was never a problem for us. And he was just always good to kind of just like he was good for me to model, hey, let's try and relate this way. And so we ended up having this beautiful connection, even as I came to terms with, one, the church is not true. This is not the end all be all, and we need to get out of this. And he agreed, and we left together, which was beautiful, because to have a mixed faith orientation plus a mixed sex orientation, no fun. So, and I had lots of friends who struggled with that. So we left together, and then pretty quickly I was like, oh, hell, now I can consume all the gay content I've been avoiding. Like, come on, L Word, let's get caught up. Come on, there's a Gen Q. Like, what is happening? Like, so good, right? But very quickly, that was like, God, I'm like seriously starving to have emotional connection and what I knew a relationship actually was supposed to feel like for me, because I'd been with women. And so, we actually opened our marriage, and I thought we did it beautifully. And it was, well, like we had researched, which was so me, and we were in a beautiful place, and leaving the church had actually really helped our relationship in a lot of areas. But it was pretty soon after doing that it was like, yeah, this is a thing. And it's not something that I want to like keep either of us tied to. And he was just so like, yeah, we don't, both of us, when we opened this, what we were saying was, yes, we know that this could end potentially and not us together. That's obviously an outcome that could come. And if we can be okay with that as an outcome, this is something that could potentially be okay and potentially be beautiful for us, right? But what we would say is, but we are strongly biased against that outcome. Like whatever we're going to do, we are strongly biased against that being the outcome. And so as we did that, and it wasn't but for several months, it was just like, hey, like this is no longer the bias that we're going to work with. And I joke all the time about it, but he drove my Uhaul, quite literally drove my Uhaul here from Idaho to Kansas. And I U-hauled very quickly with my first girlfriend at 16. And it felt like this beautiful come around story. Like this, here it is, this what if that could have played out if only my parents had not like flipped out and instead had been like, wow, we actually love this girl and think she's great. So that's exciting that we found out you're dating. We now have some rules about the bedroom because you're 16. However, we're so happy for you. Like, right, a whole new future comes into play. So
that's incredible. So are you still with him?
So he and I are actually still married.
Yeah.
And it's been 4 years that we've been not together in that way. And I can throw a rock at the building he lives in.
Right.
He and I live in the same apartment complex, and our son goes back and forth between us. His girlfriend and he have been together for 3 years. And they just introduced her child and our son to each other for the first time. And she sent me a photograph, just like my heart is busting. Like it's this beautiful, I know it's a modern situation.
Yeah.
And he and I are always like, we know divorce is coming, but I'll be real. It made sense for us to do it this way for now. And I'm coming off a spinal cord injury, and this man that I married was like, yeah, your family, no matter what. And I feel the same way about him. I feel the same about him. And we've had conflict, but like I said, I believe you can connect through it. And so that's what's happened, because I've just determined I'm going to show up secure in these situations. I'm not going to self-abandon anymore. My whole story, I just spent 20 minutes telling you, the big stamp on it is this person self-abandoned over and over and over. And the road back is not easy, but it requires forgiveness and also a lot of empathy for the choices that I made back then. It's all parts work, right? It's all just like loving the choices I made then and also forgiving the fact that it didn't look the way we thought, right?
Yeah.
That nothing's at stake, nothing's a waste of time.
There's a lot to unpack there. So in terms of your relationship with him, when you connected with him, do you feel that it was attraction or that you were trying to conform for the church?
No, I think the fluidity bit that I talked about, I think it is there. I don't know how much we can go into the detail, but there were definitely things that we had to adapt to make it work. For instance, I just couldn't deal with facial hair. It was immediate, like, nope. And so he would shave, right? He now looks crazy. He's got so much hair and there's like so much beard and right. And he's so freaking happy. And like, it's the same, a lot of times you got to think like he was married to a lesbian, right? and whether the attraction was there or not, it would take me all day. If it was like, we gotta do this today, like it was a big mental labor. And it wasn't that it was like poor or like faked through. Like I said, we were always very vulnerable and always very authentic. I wouldn't have any other thing. I can't be in a relationship like that without authenticity. It just requires too much intimacy for me to be in a relationship without that.
And, you know, if we step back as well, coming to terms with, I don't know, sometimes we try to put ourselves in a box and identify, well, who exactly am I? Am I lesbian? Am I, bi? Yeah. What am I? And, and I think we almost need to give ourselves this grace where we go, you know what, this is fluid. Let's just explore it and feel what's right. But we get and again, it's another thing we get conditioned to is like, if you're this, and you're nothing else. But it's not like that, is it? Like it's a fluid thing. Even for straight people, it's like, attraction varies depending upon,
I always
human
joke,
being.
It's funny to me, like sometimes, I mean, you can see I'm mask of center. I am very mask presenting. I joke that though, in fact, I have a very feminine energy. And so when I walk sometimes in the room, I can see when straight women look at me and are like, wait, what? Like they're not sure what to do, because you can see it for a second. And so it's interesting. But to speak to the fluidity, I do just want to say, though, that, however, I do think erasure is a real thing when we do start to just say everybody's fluid. Because, in fact, if there's a spectrum, that means there have to be folks on this side and there have to be folks on this side. And so to just kind of stamp it as like, well, it's all fluid because it's a spectrum. Yes, there are those of us who probably that relates to. I now say I'm a lesbian and I can do it without crying because I know that a relationship with a man is not fulfilling. Not in all the ways that I want to choose to relate in that type of way. Like I said, I'm single. So I'm out here just like, I'm dating the hell out of myself for the first time, right? And it has been beautiful. It's been beautiful to be able to like choose intentionally who I connect with, choose intentionally how quickly I'm doing that. Like, why do we get on this relationship escalator? That's really the message of Queerly Attached, is like, can we please speak to the fact that so many of these relationships crash and burn and just roller coaster back and forth, push, pull, and we never like stop to say, hey, if you're not going to change, I guess I'm going to. Because the truth is it's you. Like, it's always you first. It's your life first. It's you to change first, right? So I guess I just wanted to capture that, because I know that the lesbian community, the bi community are like, hey, we are real, man. And whatever the label is, I think it's more like, can we just stop gatekeeping?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Stop gatekeeping.
I agree. And yeah, I mean, for me, I tried to conform for 23 years and I came out when I was 23 and I dated so many men, I lost count. And I'm like, why is none of this working? And then when I had my first girlfriend, I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. And, even 20-something years later, I still was like questioning myself and I was like, are you sure about this? And then I tested the water. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure about this. And I think that's where we've just got to be kind to ourselves and go, you know what? Yes. It's okay to question what you're feeling. It's like, and it's completely normal, just go with what feels right for you. And when you find that sweet spot, that's where your authenticity shines. Like you're saying, you're dating the hell out of yourself and you're not crying about the word lesbian. Yeah. And I used to be that way where I couldn't even say the word lesbian. I was like, I hate that word. I absolutely hate it. And so now I will say it unapologetically. And like it took for me as well a long time to accept, that label and who I was, and then that all is rooted in self-esteem, self-love, all that kind of stuff.
And it's also rooted in attachment wounding. What you're speaking to is attachment wounding. I mean, that's really the gist of it. Is think about everything you just said. I wrote down questioning. I wrote down coming out. I've something that I've said lately is just that, we talk a lot about coming out, but we don't talk often about the being in, and the being in is where the trauma happened. The being in is where we were wounded. And the story of being queer and being gay and lesbian and all of it, the story is a story of resilience. We are courageous and we pride the fuck out of every month that we possibly can. But we're not talking often about what actually happened in the closet. All the questioning, all the like, yes, I am, no, I'm not. Also, is society cool with us? Are they not? Are my parents down? Are they breadcrumbing me? It's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
And it bleeds into connection. It just has to.
And I know when I was a teenager, I would have family members going, are you sure you're not gay? And I'm like, no, don't be silly,
Yes.
And then
Did
when
they ever ask their straight cousin that?
Yeah. And
no.
I denied it for a long time because I wasn't connected with it yet. And later on when I did come out and I told some of my friends, I'm like, I could have told you that years ago. I'm like, well, why didn't you send me the memo? So
I love that. And you're like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
That's a good question too, though. Even that is like homophobia. Why didn't we tell you? Because all of us were like out here scared to be that.
Yeah.
It was terrifying to be that at that time. So it was like, I don't know. Did you see what just happened to Ellen? Twice? Right? Like, it's bonkers. Even like right now with, like, I got married during Proposition 8, which was going on in California in 2008, and it was a vote on same-sex marriage, right? Like, that stuff messes with you. There's just no way. If people are literally voting on your right to exist and your right to love, like, that's going to mess with you.
Yeah. We had the same thing here in Australia where they had a referendum for people to vote on whether same-sex couples could get married. And I went, hang on a minute. How is this fair that the government is having a whole election on whether I can marry the person I love? Like, if I'm straight, I don't have to worry.
Nope.
Like,
not at all.
Total bullshit.
Even though the argument was like, it's going to ruin marriage. I'm like, y'all are at 50% divorce rate. You ruined marriage.
Yeah, you did that all by yourself.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. So I think that's really it, is because these things happen, and the question is always, what do you make it mean? We typically make it mean something about ourselves, because what is our other option? We're out here in this external environment, but the only thing we can control is us. So it's just easier sometimes to just be like, well, it must be me. I'm not enough. I don't matter. Clearly, they don't consider me. And these wounds just dig in, and our identities are formed around them.
So let's dig into this attachment style stuff. Firstly, for people that are listening and like, what are you going on about? Do you want to explain to us what attachment styles are?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. I mean, we've kind of already talked about spectrum, so let's just keep using that. So we've got this spectrum, right, of, I call it just kind of this anxiety spectrum, right? And so on one side, you may have anxiety, and on the other side, you may have avoidance, okay? So before I get into what the names of them are, what are attachment styles? It's not a disorder. It's not like a trendy thing. It's not your like Harry Potter house. It's like, it really is just a strategy that your subconscious has adopted to keep you safe, which is the only goal, is just to keep us safe. So where do we pick these up? We pick these up in attachment figure ways, right? When we were born, you understand all that. So when we're born, we have these people who are modeling to us how to emotionally regulate, how to survive, right? And as we get older, one example I use is like, I'm a young kid, I'm 3 or 4, I'm jumping up and down in front of this video camera. My dad keeps saying, sit down, sit down, sit down, because they're trying to film my brother, right? What do I make that mean? What am I making that mean? Or 3 or 4? That's not what they meant. They didn't mean sit down and don't ever talk again and don't ever express your voice. But enough of those happen and you learn, well, it's not working, so let me try something else. What happens if I'm quiet? Oh, things are nicer when I'm quiet. I'm not on eggshells. What happens if I pay a lot of attention and I get really hypervigilant and I can read this body language? Look how much safer I am. Look how much, but no, like we just end up building these strategies up to really keep us boxed up and masked. It's people pleasing. It's manipulative because we're trying to keep connection, right? It's not that we're like doing it because we're trying to be harmful. We just don't want to risk abandonment or rejection. So we come back to the spectrum. There's 3 insecure attachment styles. You've got anxious, preoccupied. You've got dismissive, avoidant. And then you have some in the middle that you may call fearful, avoidant. And fearful, avoidant folks kind of pull from both sides of the spectrum. And one of my clients today that I just spoke with, she is a fearful avoidant, and her husband is a dismissive avoidant. Okay. And so she has been surprised how anxious she has been showing up. But sometimes that's what happens when you're fearful avoidant and you're with another extreme avoidant. It's going to pull you towards the anxious side. It's just this dynamic that kind of evolves. And we do it to make sure that we don't get rejected.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
And then there's the other side of it, isn't there? There's the more secure side.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's secure attachment, right? So what's secure attachment? Like a lot of it just has to do with boundaries and distance, right? Knowing that we can be safe and secure within relationship with independence and with boundaries. If you take it all the way back to like the young children that they did this, The Strange Situation was the name of the research project back in the 70s, Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby did. And it was a stranger in a room with a child, right, with the caregiver, but then the caregiver would leave. And so they started noticing that some children were having similar behaviors. And so what's happened is it seems to be that a lot of us, I was anxious, preoccupied. I definitely say that I'm insecure. And anxious, preoccupied folks, we kind of have like similar ways that we show up. Maybe we're the text bombers when there's conflict, right? We over-explain the hell out of it because needing to make sense is very important, right? It's this need to self-soothe, but we don't know how. And so we need to be soothed by our partner. So we're not going to let this shit go. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. Like, we're going to get it done. An avoidant person, though, may be like, fuck that. I'm ghosting. I'm stonewalling. Like, no, I don't want to talk about feelings. I don't know how to talk about feelings. A lot of dismissive avoidant folks that I coach, we use a feelings wheel. I don't know if you've ever seen it. We use it because it's so difficult just to name the emotion because they're so useless and pointless and it doesn't matter and it just hurts and it just don't worry about it. And so you just become this walking thing of like seeing how you don't matter in the world, but it's because you're constantly telling yourself that you don't matter every time you push these emotions away. It's just, no, I don't care what the message is. I don't care what you're trying to tell me until your body says, yo, something is wrong. Please listen.
And you on your website have this quiz where you can find out what kind of attachment style you have. And of course, I got curious and I went down the rabbit hole and I did the quiz just before we got online. And I came out as secure. And I can tell you it's not always been that.
So have you been able to identify what it was before?
I think it was the preoccupied, anxious. And so I used to be the one, that had to try and solve everything straight away, would over-explain things that needed to be noticed, that needed to, like have acknowledgement all the time. And that took a lot of healing, a lot of work to sort of work through that. And I think it was probably about, nearly 4 years ago, there was a really cool book I read that opened my eyes to all of this, which is called Love Me, Don't Leave Me. I just opened my eyes to how my core wounds and attachment styles came from childhood that I didn't even know about. And I just kind of went, well, that makes sense. And then I started to be able to recognize that I reacted in certain ways when certain things happened because of these wounds. And there's this attachment style. And since then, the results are there. It's now more secure because I've learnt boundaries. I've learnt to put myself first and take care of myself and not, give up my identity for someone else, which was things that I always used to do. So, it's funny how now that I'm in a really lovely relationship, how I show up. It is completely different. Like,
that's wild.
You
wouldn't even recognize yourself.
No. And I'm kind of, because when I first started in the relationship, I started in those old patterns and I kind of went, hey, this is not you.
Good.
And I was kind of like, no, we have boundaries and we keep our eyes wide open. We keep our feet on the ground and, just communicating, very clearly and, about what you will and won't accept and all of those kind of things and not freaking out if you don't hear from them for 4 hours. That is completely
making it mean
fine.
something bonkers. Like, where have they gone? What's happened?
And not needing that constant reassurance all the time. I was just like, like it got to the point now where we can go for days and I don't freak out. I'm just like, wow.
Because you're feeling secure and the distance is okay because there's security at home. There's emotional safety as your foundation, right? If you don't have this emotional safety, like we hear all the time, like, oh, we're trying to make it work. And I'm out here saying like, can we try to make it safe? Like, let's make it safe first. And then maybe it won't feel like such freaking work, right? Like nobody wants to show up to work when they're off work.
Exactly. and it shouldn't be such hard work, right?
Exactly.
It shouldn't.
Right. Right, but think about what you said, 4 years of very active, probably inner child healing and parts work. And the fact that we weren't taught this is where it's just so sad. So to me, the beauty of attachment as a parent has been now how it really is your cycle breaker. If you can understand attachment and how it impacts your child, it's amazing to repair with my son. And because I know that I'm crushing these things as like, nope, you're not going to get wounded in this moment. I'm going to show up and tell you, hey, that was my fault. That was my fault that I forgot Monday was a half day at school. This is a live example. I forgot. Right. And the school called and it didn't come through and it went to his dad who's on business in Wisconsin. So I'm like, yay for good parenting because we were okay about it. But he called me and was like, hey, did you remember? And I'm like, oh no. Right. My son could have made that mean a million things. But you know what it did do? It reminded him of the one time I'd ever had that happen when he was in first grade. My son's 10. He remembered it when he was 6, right? So we had a beautiful conversation in the car about that, about like just that was my fault. And I even remembered what had happened. So I was able to like share that with him. And it didn't have to mean like my mom doesn't care about me, which would have been an easy assumption to make at 6 years old.
And it can be the smallest things, can't it, that stay in our psyche and in our consciousness that then are triggered later on that we're not even aware of. And you're just like, well, I didn't know that. But what I learned was that because I spent a lot of time being raised by my grandmother, I had a very different relationship with my mother growing up, for various reasons. But it was kind of like, And then my mum told me that, that her mum never showed her love. And I was like, so this is a generational thing. So it's kind of like, and then learning what love actually is, and how people teach their kids what love actually is. It is not giving up your whole life for someone and your identity.
And that's what we see modeled all the time. Yeah. We see it modeled all the time. One time I asked my son, what do you think the most stressful part? No, what do you think the hardest part about being an adult is? And he said, stress. And I was like, yeah, honestly, that's pretty close. I honestly think it's emotional regulation. It's really hard as an adult because so many of us weren't taught, and I asked him, I said, hey, what time is your emotional regulation class at school? And he was like, we don't have that. And I was like, don't you think it'd be cool if that was at one of your specials, right? Like, let's not take away from them, but let's add once a month, just an assembly on how to feel your feelings, right? Like it's got to be more than just showing them a graph of a happy and a sad face. Like, let's actually talk about what they are, what emotions are, how our bodies are literally speaking to us with these sensations. Like, we're not learning that young. And then we have children and expect these little like robots to show up and know how to regulate, and we lose our shit on them, right? And it's like, it's just this circle, it's this pattern, and we just keep acting it out. So somebody has to stop and say, yo, I know what that felt like, so I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to stop here. And why I'm so jacked up about attachment and helping the queer community with it is because I think if we could get out here and teach folks not only to be in relationships securely, but to date secure, like that changes so much about everything out there in the community. If we can show up secure and like leave these relationships when we know they're not it, instead of doing this bouncing and back in the thing, right? Or stay in these relationships and actually work together to become emotionally safe first here, to know who we are, to plant this flag of like, I'm not going to self-abandon. I don't want to be with someone who's self-abandoned. Can we both commit to that? And if you can, that walks you a totally different path than half the story I've told you about my life, right? How many choices did I have to make to give up on me to keep going the way that story went? It's over and over and over again.
Yep. And yeah, we've all done it. And that's, sometimes we've got to create so much damage to learn. But the thing is that we don't need to. And it just baffles me that there's no education about this. And I completely understand and get, particularly in the queer community, how it can get so wrong. You know what I mean? Like, you're actively dating in the scene at the moment. And
I'm not, actually. I say I'm securely single and not looking.
All right, good, excellent.
No sliding.
But I tell you what, dating here, like using the apps and all that kind of stuff, like it is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And nobody I'm actually not going to say what I was thinking, but I think that there's some people who don't go into it with the right intent.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
Yes. Well, why? And why? A lot of us are driven. First of all, I've never even messed with the apps because I just know it's a dumpster fire, so I'm not going to go near it. Most of the thing apps I've done is Podmatch, and it is kind of fun to swipe. But hey, that's my plug for that shit. But no, I think it's just because we just don't know how to just be still sometimes, right? And just like, it's okay if we're not moving from these relationships to relationship to relationship. But these wounds just make us seek out, because it's just too hard sometimes to sit with you when you like, I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever been just like, before you were secure, have you ever just had a moment of like stillness or quiet, and all of a sudden you were like, who the fuck am I? Like, I don't know who I am. Yeah. It's freaky. It's really freaky to have those moments. And I think when those happen, if you are in this mindset of like, this is my life, man, and I get to choose what I do, it really is a choose your own adventure. Those moments are really cool to like, be like, okay, who am I? And if you can show up curious instead of judgmental, what a conversation to have with yourself. And
I don't know about you, Kylie, but I spend a little bit of time on TikTok now and then, and there's a whole lesbian subculture going on in there.
It is, yeah.
Some of it good, some not so good. But exactly what you're saying is there's almost like this, again, conditioning within this community where it's like, oh, I can't be on my own. Oh, I got a date. Oh, all of this kind of, you don't need someone to complete you. You can complete yourself.
Yeah, it's like pithy, but like it's you. You're the one, right? Like you're the one. And so that as soon as you realize I'm the one, everything snaps into place. It's like waking up from the Matrix, I honestly feel like, because it's honestly like being unburdened, because so much of the stress that we bring on and so much of the like disarray and chaos is because we're trying to control shit that's not ours to control. And when you really just focus back on like, what is mine to control? It's not actually that much. And when you realize it's really just you, it makes you just move empowered, I have found. Because I have been very clear now, like, this is my path. And it's not that my standards are high. I just know that I'm not going to move away out of alignment again. Being incongruent is not, it's like friction. It's just this friction. Like taking sandpaper and just like, well, this feels great. Like, that's not a choice I'm going to make anymore. And so it is, I keep saying it, but it feels like planting my flag. It's that important to me. Like, I won't do that again. Right. And it is an intentional way of living. And it has been beautiful, the opportunities and the people that it has brought me. Like one kind of pitfall, I don't know if you got through on my website, but I'm very playful. I'm a past recreation therapist, so everything's a game. But on the website, there's like, it's steps to secure, and it breaks this little board game. But I have it as advantages and pitfalls of each of these insecure attachment styles. And as I was building it out, I was like, okay, well, what's like a pitfall of secure? And I didn't list one on the site, but I have come up with one since. And I think the pitfall is that as you begin to kind of walk more secure in each of these moments that you show up in, people will fall away. Whether it's because boundaries are now being set, and instead of just being like, they crossed my boundary, secure is I get to uphold this boundary now, right? Because I know that this boundary has been set because it keeps me safe and you safe, because that's all the boundaries are, right? And so when you get to those types of moments, you start to notice who's not down for it, who's not down for the change. And so it kind of is a falling away. And so that can be grief and lonely, and that's all part of the journey, though, because to me now, I welcome emotions when I feel them. Like I do. I enjoy being curious about myself. Like I really like. I kind of joke, but I'm just like, Nancy drew the shit out of it. Like, just get so curious. Like, it's so interesting when you get as interested in you as you ever got in them.
And I completely agree with the pitfall of being secure and exercising those boundaries actively, because I've had that happen in the last year in particular, where I've gone, you know what, I won't accept this anymore. And if you can't handle that, then sorry, we're done.
That's the moment. Yeah. That's the moment we're all avoiding, is that hard moment.
And, I explained why. I was very clear in my communication. I was like, I will no longer stay in a space where I'm not seen, heard, understood, and celebrated, because that's not what I'm here for anymore. So if you can't bring me that, meet me in the middle, we're done.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
And listen to those standards. Come on. 4 standards you just said. Seen, heard, valued, and celebrated, I think you said. What a wonderful addition, that last one. I mean, that's it. And if that's not what you're receiving in a relationship, this is where I get probably a little bit, I'm going to challenge you. I'm a coach. But like, if that's not what you're receiving, please ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Right? Why? And I'm going to guarantee you it's going to come back to, what's my worth? What do you believe about your own worth and value? And if you really check in with that question, it's going to start to be reflected in what's going on around you.
And I think the beauty in that, Kylie, is that, and I'm going to bring my spiritual side here as well, is that when you start to do that, you're setting a whole new vibration for yourself, and you're going to start to attract exactly what you do need in your life. And you'll make space by those people falling away. So it's almost like a benefit that once those people make space in your life, the right ones will move in, and they'll be there to support you and give you exactly what you've asked for.
Exactly. Because it's like real recognized real, right? Like you just start, it is a literal energy, right? It's energy, it's frequency. We are literally just resonating and like drawing to us what it is we're putting out. And so when you start to then kind of define, all right, what does it look like to walk secure for me? What does that mean? It starts to become fun because you get to start creating. Right. Instead of just kind of like showing up and seeing what the day gives you. Now you're a fucking creator, like capital C. Like, yo, that's the way to live. Yes, I want to sign up for that. Like, I'm 40. Let's do the next 40 like that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Now, I just want to step back on this social media thing that I was getting at before. I don't know if you've seen the one where they do the red flags and the green flags in relationships. Like, I know it's oversimplification, but I think what it's breeding to a degree is this sort of, red flag, no, you're out, so they're not actually going to work on anything or heal anything or repair anything. It's just red flag, I'm out.
Yeah, and you can see how avoidant people, that would really trend towards them, right? That would be very easy to be like, ooh, that's a nice option. I'm just going to go with the red flag thing, right? Because then dip before. And so, yeah, I agree with you.
And this is where your coaching can actually help people get out of that kind of mindset and start to see that, just because there's a red flag, it doesn't mean it's a full red light. You know what I mean?
It's not a full stop sometimes, right? Like there probably are a lot of yellows that we probably have already blown past, is kind of what I say. If we're going to put colors to this shit, then let's just look at, you're not just going from green to red. I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia, but that's not how it is here. You've got a bit of a yellow to get through if you're lucky, and a little padiddle if you really get lucky. So I don't know if that's probably a U.S. Midwest.
What the hell is that? Can you explain that?
So you go through a yellow, I'm going to do it so Midwest. I'm sorry, from Kansas. You go through a yellow light and hit the roof and say padiddle.
Right. Okay. Didn't know that one.
It's probably a Kansas thing. We'll probably take this part out. All right. So, Anyway, I'm just saying that there are yellows. And so what I say is it's not just that like these full stops, but you're taking notice, right? And it's not taking judgment. We're just taking notice. Okay, I've set a boundary. It's not like, are they going to cross it? It's just, I know that I'm going to uphold it. And if it's upheld and then I notice, what's the reaction there, right? I have some now things though that I have like noticed in relationship that like double standards, right? If I see a few times of double standards, I'm good, right? Like I'm okay. There's going to be times where we're kind of miscommunicating on stuff for sure. So that's not like a hard stop the first time that happens for me. But when you start to see this pattern of a double standard, like that is something you already know you're not being heard or understood because you're not even being valued on the level that they value themselves. So like that's something to notice. And I've been in relationships where that just gets blown past. And then there you are at the end and just like, God damn. I mean, yeah, we're not even like showing up the same at all. But think about how much I had to tolerate to get to that point.
Yeah. And I think it's also communicating like I had another interview last night where we were talking about this and how people just don't talk about stuff in relationships. And I think one of the things we need to be very careful of is the language that we use, for one, and two, to not just do it in a way where we're blaming them. It's like, oh, you did this, so now it's this. And it's like, no, how about you just explain your experience and what you're feeling, because we're not good at talking about feelings, are we? But like what you're doing and how I react to it and why. And this is what it does in me. And if you can actually explain that in a way so that they're like, you know, when you do that, it actually makes me feel like this. And if you can explain that and then also root it to why, you might see some change.
Yeah, I sort of have this language now where I've been coaching is that I have found that if you will show up to a conversation, one that you are, first of all, conflict is not good or bad, right? There's not a negative or positive to this. The same with consequences. It just is a moment that happens where we're incompatible for this moment on this thing. It's a conflict. If we show up with the intention to connect instead of the intention to contend, which is what happens, right? We show up and all of a sudden it's contention instead of connection. And we're like, well, here we go again. Well, yeah, of course. You showed up both ready to box. Like there's no co-op. This is a co-op game. You have said, lots of us have said, hey, let's do this for forever. Let's do this for a while, right? But then we show up to these conflicts and it's like bailing ship so fast because we don't understand that conflict isn't bad. Conflict, in fact, can grow your intimacy because conflict is a moment to connect and see how do we show up in these hard times, right? So what I have been saying is like, what's helped me is to show up with my fear first, right? And just say, hey, I have some fear about approaching this conversation. I have some fear because I know I haven't shown up my best in stuff before. Maybe when we talked about this, I know that I have felt hurt before, how in ways you have shown up. I know I've hurt you in the ways that I've shown up. So I feel a little bit of fear. I just want to let you know that. Boom. Now, it should, if this is a person who loves you and cares for you, it should be a little disarming because it's like, God, thank you. That was super vulnerable, right? Like, thank you for narrating, which is what communication is. Because what we want to narrate next is the feeling. And you can't really talk in feeling. If you were going to say the words, I feel, it better end with one word next. Okay. I feel sad. Not, I feel like it's really annoying when that's not a feeling. You haven't done anything there but tell about what you think about what you feel.
Yeah.
So let's go back to what do you feel? Hey, I feel sad. I feel sad. And when I sat with that sadness, I realized I made something mean something. And instead of making it mean that, I decided I want to come to you and just ask for clarification. I made this thing mean that you didn't care about me that moment. I made it mean that you hadn't even considered what we had going on that night or whatever's happening, right? And they get to say, oh my gosh, no, that's not what I meant. Thank you for telling, right? But if you say that and then the response is like, what the fuck? That's not, why are you going on about this again? You're so freaking sensitive, right? Like, okay, that's a moment for me to notice. I have shown up secure and vulnerable. I have not done any blaming, any finger pointing. I have just set the stage for a conversation about conflict. And the response has been that. So I get to decide, okay, what's my boundary here? Well, I know that I'm not going to stay in a space where I'm not seen, heard, valued, or celebrated, right? So I'm going to reinforce that boundary and then see what happens. And if it's still a no, then I'm going to say, hey, I'm starting to feel dysregulated because my boundary is starting to be crossed. And I know that this is a moment that's going to feel hard and uncomfortable, but I need to remove myself from this situation. I'm not doing it to stonewall or withhold from you. I want to talk to you about this. I shared with you that I'm scared to talk with you about it. I want to, and I want to when we both feel regulated. I'm going to step out when I feel regulated, and when you feel regulated, I would love to come back to this. Like, it's a whole other way of relating. And I know maybe it sounds long and boring, but like, have you ever talked to someone like that? Like, it's just a literal narration instead of this blaming for feeling.
And again, it's another thing we're not taught is how to, have those kind of conversations. And
exactly.
I think if you can just take a breath and take a moment in those really tough situations and just go, you know what, I'm going to need a minute to process. Can we chat about this later? Because I'm feeling something and I really just need to dig into it. And, can we come back and talk about
feeling
it?
Something doesn't mean that I don't love you or that you matter or that you're enough or that you're wrong for feeling anything about what just happened.
Yeah.
I just need to go figure out what happened inside me because something just did.
Yeah.
And so I need to go away to be curious about that so I can come back to you with a processed, vulnerable statement about what I just experienced. I can't wait to hear what you did because I want to get to know you. I want us to be able to move through these things faster so we don't lose a whole weekend.
Exactly.
I don't know if you've been in those where it's like you don't talk for 3 days and then they hit you up with like a, hey, are we good? And you're like, no, dog, we're not
Hell
good.
No.
We haven't spoken since the last time that we both had this thing happen. Like, it's not okay. We are too scared to actually repair and resolve.
And I mean, if you love each other, there should be no question that you can give each other a minute to sort of, process what you got to process and then come back as your best selves and have that conversation.
Well, I'm going to challenge it a little. I think it's more if you love yourself, because it really isn't about if you love them, because I feel like we probably would say that we did love them, but we just couldn't manage it because we weren't loving us. And so once you love yourself, it's just easier to show up that way. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think if we can give ourselves the space as well as allow others to do the same, I think you're going to have a much better outcome much quicker and not be cranky at each other all weekend and actually do more damage than good.
No, I mean, have you ever, this is going to sound dramatic, but this has been for me in several relationships. Have you ever gotten in a fight and then it's time for bed and you're the anxious one, so you don't want to go to bed, but they're done because they're avoiding as hell. So they're done. And you're just laying there in bed and you just feel a Grand Canyon apart. It's just this massive space in a queen bed where you're just like, how do I feel so alone right now? I look back on that, Kylie, and I'm just like, man, I want to go hug her because she thought that she had to stay there. She thought that that was normal, or she thought that that was what she was worth. Was going to bed feeling like that, right? And the self-love comes in, and that doesn't mean that all of a sudden now it's fixed and she and I probably roll over and have a great night. No, but maybe I get up and I go self-soothe instead of laying there waiting to be turned to or hoping that this, or no, go take care of me. Don't stay there and teach myself this is all you're worth.
And some of us do that in our entire lives, and think that this is how it's meant to be because that's what's been modeled for us. And it's not healthy half the time because we're not happy. In our heart, we're not happy.
And that's what makes me so sad about it, is because why do we keep choosing to be unhappy? Whatever your spiritual, whatever that is about this life, you do know that you have this determined amount of time here. Right? Every day we're just, let's be grateful we woke up. That's how we don't know about this life. And so if it's that way, why not choose happy instead of just choosing safe? And I'm not even meaning I guess I'm going to retract that. Instead of choosing comfortable, right? We stay in what's comfortable and familiar instead of getting a little bit uncomfortable to see, okay, why is it I'm really staying in this? What am I getting out of this? What am I protecting myself from? Right.
And often fear keeps us where we are because we don't want to be alone. And you know what? Sometimes it's safer, happier, and more comfortable to be alone.
Yes. And it's a hard path to learn, but what a worthwhile one. And that's, I mean, I wish there was a thing called a self-abandonment coach, because that's really what I would like have as my byline, because I'm very passionate about the fact that like, it's your life. Like, let's choose what we want to do with it. It doesn't have to be so stressful. It doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean stressful things don't happen. But this emotional regulation and the things that we are talking about are going to change the way you show up in situation. And that's going to change the outcome. It just does. It's a consequence. It's not negative or positive. It just changes outcome.
And there might be some people listening, Kylie, that are thinking, oh, how is this so different for queer people? And I guess if, you know, you don't identify as that, you know, it can, you know, there's just so many challenges that we face on a daily basis that other people may not. And then that can then be overlapped with other challenges that everybody has in life. And then on top of that, we can get into cross-cultural relationships as well, which puts in another layer of complexity. It's like we like to mix the pot. And so that comes with its own challenges. And so that is why I think, you know, these things feel like they're more amplified for us.
Because they are. What the hell? I know we don't use like the phrase gay agenda anymore, but do you remember like the gay agenda and all the talk about like what in the world, right? Like, gee whiz. So yes, it makes sense that it's amplified in our relationships and in ourselves, because it is. We have been coming up in a society where it is amplified. It is controversial. It is something you can vote on. It is something you have to protest for. It is something you have to fight and vote on.
Yeah.
There's an impact. It would be nonsense to suggest that there's not.
And I think also that we tend to push through all of these barriers and challenges without help. And I think that's where, you know, people like you are super important for our community to help people through this kind of stuff, and who can have really fantastic, loving relationships and also love themselves at the same time.
Absolutely. I say that this thing that I'm saying about my life, and I won't self-abandon, like I say, why not resource the hell out of yourself, right? Like I go to therapy every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and I have a business coach, and I actually have a human design coach, and yoga and Reiki and meditation. Like, yes, I'm going to resource the hell out of myself, because I believe I have worth, and my mental health is important. It just is flat. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes work to be this good, right?
That's right. Works in good barber, according to the man. You're crushing that.
Oh, thank you. Now, I got to ask you, for everyone who's listening, we've been talking about the attachment styles. We've been talking about all the cool stuff that you do. Can you tell us where people can go to find out more if they want to do the quiz and get in touch with you and get some coaching?
Sure thing. So the website is queerlyattached.net, and the quiz is there, a little bit more about my bio. You mentioned TikTok, so I'm going to do a little plug there. My socials, it's at queerlyattached to all of them, but I'm going to do a plug on TikTok because, you know, I haven't been on TikTok until starting this Queerly Attached because, one, I knew I would get addicted and I had to stay away. And I knew that my algorithm would be very telling.
Yes.
And so I just stayed off of it. So now I'm out here and I'm working on creating these reels. And let me just tell y'all, please go follow on TikTok. And when you swipe through, just remember, folks be spending hours on these reels, and the learning curve is insane. I am very proud of my TikTok. I have worked hard at those reels as a 40-year-old. So at Queerly Attached, that would be great. We're trying to get up to 1,000 followers there, because then I can go live. I love just going live and just chatting. I just love talking about this stuff and just hitting up in the comments. Like we've had some really great like Zoom lives as well. So if you're on Facebook, I have a Facebook group called Secure Connections, Queer Attachment with Kylie. That's growing. I've been going live in there once a week. I just did last week a Zoom live. It was Securely Single, Finding Peace in Any Season, and had several show up for a Zoom call there. And that was great. So it's been good. We're starting to make a little traction here.
Nice. Well, hopefully people listening will jump on the TikTok and go check it out. I'm there as well. So you'll probably find snippets from this interview there.
Follow on.
All right, I got the last big question for you, Kylie. I know we could talk all day and probably one day we will, but the last big question for you is what's the change you'd like to see in the world and how can we bring it to life?
Oh, gosh. So I kind of joke about it, but I say hashtag fucking lesbians. Like, I would love to change the stigma. I would love to teach lesbians, queer people to date secure. I think that would have a massive ripple effect all the way down to think about all the little queer families that would be growing. If they weren't fucking around with all this shit and having to go to therapy to fuck around with all this shit. Instead, you're like doing the thing and like chasing your goals and your desires. And if you want kids, you're having them, you know, like it would have a huge impact if we would all show up for ourselves and stop abandoning ourselves just to be an attachment.
You made me laugh there because again, I clearly spend too much time on TikTok. There's actually a jingle they've got on. And again, this is my algorithm. They've actually got a jingle that says, all of you lesbians are fucking crazy.
Yeah, I believe it. And I want to bust that thing up so hard. I want it to be like, Uhauling? What's that? Like, no, no, we're out here.
And there's a whole other episode on that as well. And I think, we got to educate.
We can talk forever, I think.
Yeah, we got to educate. We've got to amplify this stuff because
yes.
Imagine if we had this world, Kylie, where there were these powerful lesbians who are out there getting shit done and making a difference.
Yes. And I'm starting to do local things here in Kansas City. I'm doing workshops. They're selling out. Mm-hmm. They're selling out. Folks want community. Folks want to talk about this stuff. And a lot of folks are just tired of the crash and burn. Just why does it keep happening? And so the workshops have been great. And I'm working with a local queer shop now. And I mean, it's been for sure. Folks are like, yes, this is important. We need to talk about this more.
Amazing. Well, Kylie, you have been a breath of fresh air. Thank you so much for being a part of the Ethical Evolution.
It was really fun.
Thanks for listening to the Ethical Evolution podcast. If you're ready to be the change and would love to work with me on finding your voice through spiritual coaching or creating your own podcast with impact, visit ethicalchangeagency.com. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's growing every day with great content and highlights you may not have heard on the podcast. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, and why not leave a 5-star review? If you're not following me on social media, you can find me at Ethical Change Agency on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and at DJ Bindi on TikTok and Instagram.
Ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Do you have a business or a message you want to share with the world?
Well, now it's easier than ever with Electricast. Hi, I'm Mark Netter.
And I'm Peter Rafelson. We're the founders of Electricast Media.
Whether you want to start a new podcast or already have one, join Electricast to grow your audience, monetize your content, and build your community.
With our simple sign-up, you get free promotion, world-class analytics, premium ads, and personal support.
Go to electricast.com and join our community today.
Electricast. Transform your influence.
Electricast. Hi, everyone. I'm Geraldine Glass, a leader in the field of music as medicine, and I'm excited to share with you my newest release of healing sound, Pentatonic Visions, with Chris Scholler and Electricast Records. Immerse yourself in ethereal realms where the harmonies of nature, tribal rhythms, and soundscapes blend with the crystal singing bowls. It's out now, streaming on all platforms.
Electricast.